TeraCloud President Eric Long joins us this week to talk about the National Society of IT Service Providers, Enable, Knowing Your Numbers, and more, plus a special guest interview about peer groups with Arlin Sorensen of ConnectWise. It's ChannelPro Weekly, number 193. Meet the Chicken Tender. And welcome to ChannelPro Weekly, episode 193. My name is Matt Whitlock, technology editor, online director, and your host of this fine show for the folks out there who kind of do a lot of the things that you do. And I don't mean parasailing. I don't mean farming, although we might get to that a little bit later on. No, I'm talking about IT stuff, and specifically those of you out there who work with other businesses with IT, the MSPs, the VARs, the IT integrators, the managed security services providers, all of those things qualify. So if that is you, we got a lot of stuff that we're going to talk about that you are going to like. That I promise. Another thing you're going to like is we're joined this week by the man of the hour, the guy who makes ChannelPro work and run on time here and have all this cool stuff for you to check out. Executive editor Rich Freeman.
Except, of course, that we're never on time. But beyond that, I'm doing a bang-up job.
Well, you know, we're a lot better than we used to be, if you really think about it. We're on time, you know, a good 32.5%. I think that's good. And
that was that was my goal for the year, was to get from 32 to 32.5. So I'm already at target. Let's see if I can hit 33.
Progress, Rich. Attainable goals. That 0.5% is always what we want to shoot for. And how are you doing this week, sir?
I'm doing well. I am. How about you?
Yeah, I'm all right. Getting over a cold, but
you sound better than you did even just a couple days ago.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I probably got another day or two on the mend, and then I should be good to go. But yeah, no, things are well as well. Anything interesting going on at ChannelPro with you this week?
Gosh, we just shipped our August issue a couple of days ago, and as you know, the August issue every year contains our annual Reader's Choice Awards. So stay tuned, folks. We know who won, but we can't tell anybody yet for a few weeks. I guess August 2nd is when we'll break the news. So yeah, stay tuned.
Yeah, I know who won too, because I was working on putting those results online for that particular day. So folks, you'll definitely want to tune in to the episode we record and put out on August 6th, because I'm sure we'll talk about Reader's Choice Awards in that particular show. Something to look forward to. Yeah, awesome stuff. But Rich, we're not alone. We're joined by an awesome person, one of our great friends here at ChannelPro, who's been on with us several times. Always excited to see his name pop up on the show sheet. And who is that? Well, he is a man with over 25 years of experience in the technology sector and has created and sold a number of companies, including one of the first broadband internet providers in Florida. I'll take it back, right? He currently serves on the CompTIA Executive Council for IT Services and Support and regularly speaks at industry events. Please welcome the president of TeraCloud, Eric Long.
We have an old bio.
That might be an old. I was reading, as I was reading that, I'm like, you know what? I think a little bit of this is out of date. So yes, I might have to update that one, Eric's, because I did not do my due diligence and check my bio that I probably wrote a year and a half ago or 2 years ago against the current day. Tell us in your words and with up-to-date information who the heck you are.
I'm the same guy that was here last time. It's just I'm not on ITSS any longer. And they changed the name of that. I think it's TLS or something along those lines now. But yeah, president of TeraCloud, Dallas-based, but live in Florida at the moment. It's always subject to change, depending on who's chasing me. And a bunch of those companies have bankrupted. So get the record straight.
So tell us a little bit about TeraCloud and the business. For those who may not have caught some previous shows, tell us a little bit about TeraCloud and what you do there.
All right, well, we're just like the rest of you guys out there, managed service providers, striving to have play in security quite a bit, make sure that we've got our ducks in a row, and we're supporting companies all over the country. The majority are Texas and the East, but we've got a couple California stragglers hanging out there. But managed services, managed security, business applications through the Microsoft stack.
Awesome stuff. Well, we're really glad to have you here. It's been when was I think we were talking about this before the show started. The last time you were on was our big New Year's extravaganza, and then we had you back on in September. So the last time that we really had a chance to kind of sit down and talk with you more in depth, we were probably right in the thick of the whole COVID pandemic thing. Now, I know Florida has been a little bit more elusive a state throughout this as it is, but why don't we kick off the discussion here by talking a little bit about how TeraCloud's kind of gone through COVID, how it's changed your business a little bit, and kind of what the current state of that for you there.
Well, I'd say initially it probably slowed growth. That was a more disappointing thing. Initiatives that we had underway back. Rich, you and I were, where were we in Denver? We were in Aurora, I think. We did one of these things way back in the day, which doesn't seem that long ago, but pre-COVID. And so I think we did a couple of things post-COVID. But we're seeing positive changes in the industry, and with deals I thought were dead that have come back alive. So we continue to invest throughout COVID. I actually put on a collared shirt today for you guys. Normally I'd just be here in shorts and a t-shirt, but that's changed quite a bit. And sales has changed. We don't go on sales calls initially any longer. Everything's conducted via Teams and phone calls, and that's become more of the norm. We're starting to see that change, though. I mean, I've met with a number of clients and prospects and things like that of recent. So hopefully the future gets us a little back more normal. But yeah, Florida, Texas, that's our predominant base. Houston, Dallas, Tampa Bay, and up in Tulsa have mostly been normal, for this entire thing, if you call that was normal, but more normal than other states. So we're fortunate to live here and work there.
Eric, if I had really been on my game, actually, I'll let myself off the hook. If I had further advanced notice of what Microsoft was going to be announcing last week during their partner, I would have had you on last week's show so that we could get your input on Windows 365, which is brand new. It hasn't even it's not even available now. It comes out officially on August 2nd. You and I have spoken, I'm sure you've spoken on the show before about all the work that TeraCloud does in Azure Virtual Desktop, formerly Windows Virtual Desktop. So, I mean, this is kind of up your alley. What's your initial impression? What are your initial thoughts about Windows 365?
I don't believe anything Microsoft has to say. Like Windows 10 is the last version. We no longer have a blue screen of death. We have a black screen of death in Windows 11. So that's an improvement. This has been coming for quite some time. So they forget what they called it, with the Windows Cloud Desktop or whatever they had branded it prior. It's been sitting there in front of us for a long time. So if you hadn't thought about this already, you're kind of way behind the 8 ball there. I look at it as an opportunity. The Nerdio guys threw out a white paper and then a couple of press releases and things on how it's a good thing. There's change in the industry is inevitable, and it's been changing since I got into it back in 1990, and it's consistently kept up with that pace. Sometimes they seem to accelerate, the changes accelerate a little faster than others, but this one's been coming for a long time. I mean, they're competing against AWS, in their workspaces and stuff like that. So it's clear that Microsoft's going to have a compelling, offer, a counter offer to what they have to offer. I think we can do it better with better hand-holding in AVD, and we like Nerdio as a partner. They got a great interface. I can have level 1 guys manage the Azure infrastructure, so there's a positive there. That's not even a plug. They don't pay me anything. But I think that there'll be more cloud desktop. Clearly, we've invested in that and in learning platforms and training and all those kinds of things to make that happen. But until there's another major outage where somebody's, internet's down, they can't get to their cloud desktops, and they're dead in the water. So, then are we looking back at, Chromebooks or, having functional workstations where they can still get email and those kind of things? It's, those are things that you have to weigh depending on the industry and the client. But, here we are. We knew this was coming, and, it's probably millions of dollars of free marketing for MSPs, cloud-based MSPs, if you take advantage of it.
Seems like it solves a couple pain points for MSPs too, particularly like the bring your own device kind of issues that people have, because now you don't really care what device they bring, because you everything that you need to protect and manage is already cloud based, and it seems like it's a little bit easier to secure. Are there other pros that MSPs should look at?
Well, there's a couple cons. I mean, yeah, you bring your own device is always a subject, and most companies haven't planned on it, or they don't even have a policy in place, especially SMB. And that device is accessing corporate data, in the cloud, and there's going to be cache data on that device, and so there's still a risk regardless of whether or not they're in cloud or not in cloud. I mean, everybody's somewhat in cloud in some method or some manner. I don't know anybody that's 100% on premise except don't my bad. I silenced everything except for that one. There we go. So. I think the pros are, endpoint manager is pretty cool. There's this combination SCCM and Intune. As with everything Microsoft, it's overly complicated and non-intuitive. They're getting better at that, I think, as time goes on. As far as their UI, and the big issue I have with a company like Microsoft is the moving target. They're shifting things around and moving and changing things and pushing. Now we're on a monthly Office release. Where something's in a different place, and that creates support issues and stuff like that. People can't find anything, and so I think overall I think that message was probably a positive one for us. Like I say, we need to take advantage of it.
As you look at your customer base, I mean, can you see okay, these guys would probably be a good Windows 365 fit, whereas this other set of customers over here, they need something that I can only give them through AVD. Do you see a division within the client base out there for who's a fit for one versus the other?
Well, I think there's two flavors, right? There's a business version and an enterprise version. I think if we were going to do anything with their cloud desktop, we'd probably lean towards the enterprise because of controls and granularity and compliance issues and things like that. Maybe a 2 or 3 person office might opt for the lower end one. I think what we're going to find is the same kind of clients that don't think they need us now are going to use the Windows provided virtual desktop. And I think the ones that don't want to try to understand how everything works and how to install applications, and is it getting backed up? It's just, and I don't have the answer to this question, but is there shared responsibility with this product too? Meaning that, you're going to put data up in the cloud. Are you responsible for backing it up? Is Microsoft going to take care of that? Inherently, they've not wanted to do that, clearly, based on 365 and all the other stuff that they're providing.
Now, Rich, I haven't seen pricing for Windows 365 versus Azure Virtual Desktop, which I know Azure Virtual Desktop is consumption-based pricing, if I remember correctly, and pretty darn expensive. But Windows 365 was supposed to be different, at least cheaper. I don't know about cheap, but less. Have they published pricing yet?
They have not. Now I'm going to see if I can find it real soon. So in those blog posts that Eric was referring to from Nerdio, I think they leaked some of that information. I don't think Microsoft meant for this to go out there, but it did, which was very handy for me. Let me see if I can find it. Oh gosh, where is it? Yeah. What? Wait, here we go.
We all love
that. Isn't that fascinating stuff? Well, anyway, the big difference between the two of them is that, like you said, Azure Virtual Desktop is consumption-based pricing, and with Windows 365, it's flat rate. You're paying partly for Windows and partly for the cloud PC for this, virtual device. But all of that is defined in advance. You know exactly what you're going to pay. And I'm stalling here because I'm very close to licensing. No, sorry, folks. But if you look around real carefully, you can find some of that, what's likely to appear on August 2nd when the pricing becomes public. And the basic idea is Microsoft came up with a set, I forget the number, but it's something like a dozen different device SKUs, virtual device SKUs, starting with one that is, and they're all sort of use case tailored. So the cheapest one, the lowest end one, they say is ideal, say, for a call center, very simple, narrow range of tasks. And it goes all the way up to devices with, NVIDIA GPUs for designers and creative sorts and so on. And it more memory, more storage, et cetera. It gets more and more expensive as you go up. But I want to say off the top of my head that the lowest end device, and this again is independent of the Windows licensing, but the lowest end device is something like $31 a month.
That seems more expensive than I even thought it was going to be. Eric, what do you think? Is that too much?
I don't. I'd rather the cost was higher. I mean, it should be. I think they're going to have to, get their footing on the pricing. I'm sure they already have. I mean, against AWS, because that's clearly who they're competing with. The complications and let's say I want to host QuickBooks desktop, enterprise, and I need a database server. I need this. I have a line of business app. Where's that go? Those questions are yet to be answered. There's not. If it's just a desktop, where are they getting their file storage from? Is it a blob? Is it whatever? There's just so many unknowns just yet. So I think we're just going to have to see how that product evolves. I think it, like I say, I'll go back to the, it's good to, for the media, that, hey, people are going to know there's virtual desktops out there. A lot of prospects probably don't even know that, that they could do, operate that way.
So maybe there's a way to market that. Could you do like a free Hawaiian shirt with every virtual desktop? He's chuckling. He's got this flowery Hawaiian shirt on, but he didn't make any noise, so the camera didn't cut to him at that particular moment.
I've not bought any of my Hawaiian shirts. They've all been provided for me, and they are real Hawaiian shirts. So I thought I'd liven things up a little bit.
Who provides Hawaiian shirts? Is that really like a marketing thing?
No, Barbara. Pretty much.
I love it. Well, Rich, anything else we want to talk to Eric about before we just dive into the show? Because we've got a crazy show ahead. It's going to be a lot of fun. Rich, you want anything else you want to ask Eric?
Let's dive in.
All right. So we got a fun show ahead of you. We're gonna do some crazy stuff today. So we got the news that we're gonna cover, of course. We've got another story called Know Your Number. So let's get back to kindergarten and learn those digits, folks. We're covering numbers 1 through 10 today. Okay, 1 through 10. We'll talk about 11 and 12, but we're not quite there yet. We have a great interview coming up with Arlin Sorensen. He is the VP of Brand and Ecosystem Evangelism at ConnectWise, also probably more broadly known for his work with HTG peer groups. He's going to be on with Rich and I later today. We had we were only able to get him earlier, so unfortunately Mr. Long won't be with us for that particular interview. But really good discussion about peer groups. So you want to definitely check that out. And to wrap up the show, we're going to be naming chickens, and that's actually true, Rich.
That is literally what we will be doing later in this program here. So stay tuned, folks.
So Eric, just preview this for me if you can.
Well, I think we might have some logistical issues, but we'll see if we can't make it work. So we've got a bunch of chickens, and they're hard to count because they keep moving around. We got 6 brand new ones from last weekend, and we're going to try to. They all look alike.
So we've 6 twin chickens, and they don't have names. So of course, here on ChannelPro Weekly, we're going to be naming those 6 chickens before the end of the show, if at all possible. You won't want to miss any of this. Stick around. It's going to be a lot of fun. But Rich, let's dive into the news. And there's a new membership group out there headed by someone we know quite well. And he likes to influence, doesn't he? Who is it, and what is the group about?
Yeah, so the person you're talking about is Karl Palachuk, former MSP, current managed services consultant and author and coach. And yeah, he gets, he mixes it up. He gets involved in all sorts of different things. And what he has done now is get involved in the coming wave of regulations that we all know are headed for the IT channel at this point. So just as context for that, ransomware has been a big issue for years. In the last couple of years, it struck all sorts of different local governments and state governments, getting the attention of those state governments. We already have a law on the books in Louisiana, which imposes certain requirements on MSPs and MSSPs in that state. We've spoken about this multiple times on the podcast before. This is coming in a bigger way, a coast-to-coast way to the channel, and there's just no two ways about it. And so the question has long been, what do MSPs and other IT providers do about that? Do you sit back and wait for that to just show up and see, what kind of laws get written and how good they are and, how they affect your business? Or do you get a little bit more proactive than that and either try to sort of professionalize the managed services trade or influence the regulation process so that those laws look the way we would logically want them to look instead of like whatever these legislators who don't understand IT very much come up with. So, that an open question around that is, well, who's going to spearhead that process? And a lot of people were looking at CompTIA, for example, and other organizations like it, membership groups and so on, industry associations. Maybe they could kind of step in and lead that process. CompTIA, opted not to do that. From their perspective, as I understand it, from their perspective, if they behave too much like a PAC, like a political action committee, it jeopardizes their nonprofit status potentially. So, I mean, they haven't assumed that role. Nobody has really. And so now Karl Palachuk has decided that, we the channel, we the MSPs have to step in and do it ourselves. And so he has created a new organization. It is called the National Society of IT Service Providers. We will have a link to their website in the show notes for this episode here if you're curious about learning more. This is a brand new group. They had an organizing meeting yesterday that Eric and I actually both attended. And I mean, really, this was starting at square one, who are we, what do we do, et cetera, what are our ambitions? But the main thing that we know this organization has been formed to do is to influence the regulation process that's going to be unfolding across the states. And they already have, in fact, a draft of a law that states could use as the jumping off point for a regulatory process. So if they decide in California, for example, we need a law of some kind, they've got a template that they can begin with. And part of what this organization would do is form chapters in the different states and actually bring these templates to the attention of local regulators so that they have a seat at the table for this legislation process from the beginning. So interesting thing. I took a look at that template that Karl's group has created, 7 pages long. You'll find that very easily on the website if you go to the National Society of IT Service Providers there. It contains a lot of what is contained in that Louisiana law I referenced before, which has become almost like the expected foundation for these kinds of rules. So if you're an MSP or another IT provider, you've got to register with the state. The state will publish a database that customers can go look at and make sure that whoever they're buying from is actually a legitimate registered provider of IT services. If one of your customers has a breach, you got to report it to the state. If one of your customers pays a ransom, you need to report it to the state. All of that has become almost pro forma now that Louisiana has sort of set the baseline for this. What Karl's group has in their legislation that's new from my perspective is a requirement in the law that if you are an IT provider or an MSP, you must provide backup services and patching services to your contracted customers. And your customers must pay you for those services. They must agree to use those services and pay you for those. And if they don't, then by law, you, the MSP or IT provider, cannot be sued. You are not liable if that end user gets breached or ransomed, et cetera. Now, a lot of people listening right now say, well, anytime I make a recommendation like that to a customer and they say no, I make them sign a waiver and I'm protected by that now. And Karl's stand on that basically is, at the end of the day, what's going to happen is your customer's cyber insurance company is going to sue your cyber insurance company, and you're going to get stuck in the middle whether you like it or not. Like that waiver the customer has signed is not going to make this problem go away. He believes the only thing that makes that problem go away is if the law says you were required to offer it to them, you did, they decided not to accept it, you are immune from any legal action. And then just last point I'll make, we're focusing on this legislation and regulation issue, but Karl's ambitions for this group go beyond that in an interesting way that I think will resonate with a lot of folks in the audience. There are no rules today about who gets to call themselves an MSP. And as a result, there are a lot of companies out there calling themselves a managed service provider who are terrible at what they do. And they are giving the industry and that label, MSP, a bad name. Now, Karl, as I understand it, is not interested in doing what, say, lawyers and doctors do, where you can only call yourself a lawyer and doctor if you have certain credentials that are provided by a professional association and so on. But he does want this new group he's formed to come up with codes of professional conduct that define the way a legitimate managed service provider operates, so that end users, customers, can understand here's what a good provider looks like, and use that when they're shopping around for services, basically, to tell the real MSPs from the fly-by-night guys who are apt to abandon them. So those are the two big things. And again, they are just getting started. Their first meeting was yesterday. They've got another one coming up on July 28th. If you're interested in getting involved, they would be happy to have you. There is power in numbers. They are trying to recruit as many members as they can. They had dozens, I would say, Eric, dozens of people on this call yesterday, which is kind of a nice start, but they need more. So if you're interested, there's plenty of time to get involved and actually get involved in defining what this group is and what it does.
So there's a lot to dive in there, and I think that one of the things about this particular story, and we've been talking about this, especially with Dave Sobel over the last 12 months, ever since the Louisiana laws started to kind of take shape. This is kind of a big thing that's going to affect the whole industry. So there's a lot to dive into. Eric, I want to turn it over to you though, just to kind of first get your thoughts on what Karl's doing, whether you think that's the right approach, or do you think there should be a different organization that's doing that? Let's start there. What do you think of what Karl's trying to do?
Well, I think it's worthwhile. I don't think that the industry associations are going to pick this up like we would hope or would have hoped that they would do. You go back a few years, there were initiatives even at CompTIA where they were trying to get some standards and best practices and certifications for organizations as opposed to just individuals. I don't even know where that went. That one was out there for a while. There was, obviously the different communities had the different tracks in there. So it's not like this has not been talked about before. And we were talking, we were back in Washington 15 years ago. I think it's been that long, going to Capitol Hill and trying to drive public policy. But back then it was about, data breaches and who's responsible and all that other kind of stuff. Now, there's potentially, one screw up from a bad MSP or from one of their vendors, because the vendors are making us look bad when they have holes or glaring or they known problems in their product that they didn't tell anybody about, until after it was already an issue and people got exposed. And there's thousands, millions of dollars on the line. And have one cybersecurity incident, and you're probably not going to get a policy renewed again. Does that put you out of business in this legislation? It could. So, and then the other concern I have is, we're doing business across multiple states, and that's complicated and a number of different factors for licensing purposes and sales tax. I mean, we've been a nightmare with sales tax, trying to figure out what rate and where we're billing from and, all that other stuff that's out there. So then my big concern is this is harder on probably somebody working in multiple locations, or maybe they're on a state line working in 3 or 4 states, around the triangle or something like that. And in having to manage multiple jurisdictions and the legalities. So, and politicians get a hold of this stuff. It's going to be a mess when they're done with it. They really don't think through a lot of times, or they're influenced by outside parties. I don't know who would influence them in this particular case, because it's really not an industry specific thing. It's not even a national thing. It's a global thing. So it's hard to say where this is going to
elaborate on that a little bit. What is the risks of just letting lawmakers go to town on this kind of stuff? I know like nobody puts a lot of faith in lawmakers, but I mean, you have to imagine they do some research, right? And they have some advisors. What happens if you just let them do it as opposed to a group like this?
The guys that you're electing, or guys and gals that we're electing and putting in office, are really more figureheads. Having been involved in a little bit in DC, and I know you guys have had some interest in that as well. It's the staffers that are doing everything. It's the 20-somethings. They're very bright people. But then they have to convince their boss that, hey, this is your position. This is why. And that's how DC works. Things get messy, and then somebody comes in and talks to the politician, maybe from a big vendor, or maybe from an insurance company, a cyber liability provider, and they influence this, in other ways. So I just state by state legislation is great. I'm a big fan of states' rights, believe me. The feds don't necessarily do much right, but man, consistency across multiple jurisdictions would certainly be nice.
It's a really interesting point, and it actually came up during this meeting yesterday that we were in. There were some people there who thought this needs to be a national. The approach needs to be federal as opposed to at the state level. And Karl really believes that, things get done at the state level, basically. And so that's really the right way to approach it. But, for the reason you just cited, this is why I think, like, for example, you look at all the data privacy laws that are being adopted at the state level right now, and there are already some people who are saying, it would be great if there was one law at the federal level that was consistent across the country, so that you didn't, if you're doing business in multiple states, you don't have to kind of figure out all these different requirements you're bound by. It will be a similar problem in this case. If these laws are passed state by state.
Yeah, agreed.
So let's dive into the framework that Karl's putting together here, because I know, Rich, when we've talked about this topic in the past, we've talked about things like having certified credentials in order to even be called an MSP. And this template that Karl and his group is putting together, it doesn't go quite that far. Does it need to go that far, Eric? What do you think?
I guess it depends on what, inevitably these organizations, when these things form, they turn out to be something different than what they originally intended to be. And that's common in any industry. So where it shakes out in the end, I think it's great that we build some kind of a, national, standard for our institute, just like there is, and for plumbers and doctors, and you got the AMA, and you got all these other groups. I think that's important. I kind of like, there's a company out there called the Compliancy Group. No plug, not doing business with them, but there's a compliancy seal. They're doing HIPAA, but that at least there's some organization that a prospect or a client could vet you against. Or your insurance vendor could say, oh, well, they're a member of that. They meet these standards. So I think that has some value, no doubt. There's a lot of one-man shops out there. There's a lot of one-man shops that are really good. And there's a lot of, 20 people shops that are really bad, and we've come across all of them. So being able to vet and weed them out and kick people out of an organization if they don't meet the criteria I think would be a good thing.
You think a lot of law has the ability to prevent people from maybe being able to start up a business as an MSP? Does that create too much of a barrier to entry? Give too much leverage for those who are established with bigger numbers?
Yeah, starting a business is pain, no matter how you look at it, and so most of us that have got in the industry, especially way back in the day, were tinkering around with computers and fixing stuff, and all of a sudden you're in business. That was before managed services. It was before the exposure, and the advent of the internet and data becoming commonly placed in locations that we can't necessarily secure, or we're relying on somebody else to secure. Data loss prevention, that just meant you locked the door and you had a file cabinet that closed back in the day. Now it can leak out in many myriads of different ways. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see where it goes from that particular point.
All right, so let's say Eric Long gets to decide the law, right? So what would the law be under your decree? If you were going to do it all, what would you say?
Like 120 mile an hour speed limits on the interstate.
I was thinking more IT, like if you were crafting the template, but we should have a discussion about higher speed limits because they do seem awfully slow sometimes.
Yeah, work in Texas. Yeah, from an IT perspective, what state that question again?
So what would your template look like? Where would you want to see law? What laws do you make sense? What kind of framework would would be ideal in your view?
I don't think I'm smart enough to figure that out. I do intend on participating with these groups, and I'm, dividing off into subgroups and areas of talent. I've got, talents in certain industries, or more perspective into us in particular industries. We spend a lot of time in insurance, other compliances and things like that. We work with some intermodal transportation companies, so I know a little bit about that business, but I think we're going to have to break this down. There's not one person that's going to say, this is how it needs to be. It's going to have to be done on a committee-based approach, and with probably a board finalizing whatever that directive needs to be. If I had my druthers, I'd lean towards some kind of national or federal law that had at least a bare set of minimums as far as training. I think it's imperative that if you're an MSP that you've secured your own house, and anything that you're recommending to others, you better already have done in yours. We've done that quite some time ago. We kind of keep a zero trust environment, which is, there's no such thing really, or there is, we can argue that point. But we've made sure that our house is intact. But you know what? I've got vendors that I'm working with. I want to know that, they're SOC compliant. I want to know that they're protected, or what. I also don't want to put all my eggs in one basket. I want to have the ability to knock a vendor out real quick if there's some kind of exposure, and shut that system off inside, my client. And so we're mitigating any kind of risk to them. But I think that the vendors need to play a part in this as well, not just the managed service provider, because the two are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, actually, that was going to be my next question. Was how, because law is a slippery slope, right? As soon as you write a law, you realize it starts to impact other things. How much of this is going to impact the vendor as much as it is the MSPs?
That's so tough to tell, because I cannot tell you how many new vendors were approached by. There's a new startup every time you go to a different. Well, now we're going to events, but every time somebody comes up with a new idea, or they try to patch a hole between two vendors, and that's where we run into those issues of vendor overlap. I think keeping your stack, especially your security stack, as minimal as possible, while servicing the things that you need to do with your client, for your client, and the mitigation, loss mitigation, and due diligence, all the things that we need to be doing on a regular basis to protect our clients is processed with as little company involved as possible. Of course, we were all using VSA a few weeks ago, and that was the only RMM in the country. We'd be in serious trouble right now. So a little diversity, and having the ability to double check your work on a regular basis, which we're looking at doing now. We're using third-party tools to kind of just come behind us and say, hey, yeah, let's validate that environment, that customer's environment. Did we do what we say we were going to do? And so we're going to simulate those kind of attacks and breaches and things like that.
Very, very interesting. Well, it's a big topic. I'm sure we're going to be talking about a lot more over the next year or two, as a lot of these laws start to take shape, like what we're seeing in Louisiana. It's going to be pretty much everywhere, as Rich said, coast to coast as we go forward. So we'll be visiting this topic often, I assume. Rich, we do have one other news story to touch on this week, and that's from Enable. What's going on with Enable?
For a while now, since last August, basically, every time Enable, which used to be known as SolarWinds MSP, every time that name, either of those names has come up on the podcast, one of the things that we've always mentioned is that they might be splitting off from SolarWinds and becoming an independent company, IPO'd, publicly traded, et cetera. And there has been every reason to believe for an extended period of time that was going to happen. It was really just a question of when. We found out just a few weeks ago when that was going to be, and that process would complete this week. And sure enough, it did, right on schedule. Enable is no longer a division or a unit of SolarWinds. It is an independent business. It is traded on the New York Stock Exchange. They no longer have any business relationship whatsoever, in fact, with SolarWinds. SolarWinds doesn't own any portion of Enable. Thoma Bravo does. So, for those of you familiar with Thoma Bravo, a very big, prominent private equity firm. They own Barracuda and ConnectWise and Sophos and Proofpoint, I think, most recently, among others. They continue to have a fairly substantial ownership stake in Enable. So does Silver Lake Partners, another familiar IT investment company. Both those firms own a huge chunk collectively of the new business, but it's an independent business now. As Enable has been telling us, consistently for many months now, what that means for them and for their partners is they are no longer competing for attention, competing for resources at the corporate level with other parts of the SolarWinds business that are more focused on corporate IT. This is a company 100% dedicated to managed services and MSPs, and so there's going to be more focus. They did raise, I believe it's $225 million, through this spinoff process. So they've got some money now to invest as well, and we'll see what kind of effect that has. And then the other interesting thing that came up when I was talking about this with the Enable folks is, they spun off from SolarWinds. That meant they had to build an entire infrastructure for this new independent company from scratch, essentially. They couldn't, rely on the SolarWinds data centers, SolarWinds software, et cetera. So they built themselves an absolutely brand new, so presumably state-of-the-art infrastructure and security stack in Microsoft Azure and Microsoft 365 principally. Which may or may not, I don't know if it may or may not reassure some people out there who are still a little leery of the SolarWinds infrastructure. There's no connection to any of that even remotely anymore. They've built their own tools from scratch, essentially.
So you're saying they've done as much as they could possibly do to distance themselves from SolarWinds?
The name, different infrastructure, different software. Yeah, no ownership crossing. Yeah, they are 100% free and clear of SolarWinds at this point. So,
Eric, any thoughts on Enable finishing their spinoff? Good thing, bad thing?
I just recall, when the Air Florida crashed in the Everglades, they renamed it to AirTran, but the plane still crashed afterwards. So I don't know where they're going with this one. I'm not very. SolarWinds actually was a Clearwater-based company down in the downtown area, Clearwater, years ago, and so they were an enterprise tool. We used to use a lot of their stuff way back in the day before the advent of managed services tools, which obviously they're exposing us to security risks and things like that. I get why they probably split. SolarWinds. You get these huge organizations that are enterprise minded, and I see that with new vendors getting in the MSP space. That I'm finding that no, they've been around for a long time. They're just now fresh to the MSP space, and they're trying to learn our industry, which is way different than selling to corporate IT. And it's a whole different mindset in the company. So I get why they wanted to get away from them. And obviously the name is the name. But there's a lot of brands out there that I don't particularly want to be associated with. And Enable is probably a fine tool. I haven't seen it in a decade, so I get why they split though.
So best of luck to those at Enable in your new journey as your own independent company. Hopefully things go well for them. Like we want everybody to be successful here. So good luck, Enable. We'll be following you in the news and seeing what you do.
A couple of quick notes just before we move on. In future episodes of this podcast, folks, we are Karl Palachuk has agreed to come on and talk about the National Society of IT Service Providers. That'll happen actually in September sometime. And we are booked, I think, in just 2 or 3 weeks to have John Palachuk, the president and now CEO as well of Enable, on the show for an interview segment. So we'll be returning to these stories in future weeks.
Ooh, something to look forward to. You won't want to miss those, folks. Mark your calendars today. All right, so we're going to move on a little bit, and we've got a new story that we're going to talk about. It's not news, but a new story. That's called Know Your Numbers. So I know we said at the top of the show, we're going to go back to kindergarten, and we're going to be talking about numbers 1 through 10 today, and their impacts on your life. So Rich, tell us about number 1. No, yes, Rich, tell what is this about? Tell us what it's about.
I was going to say this story is brought to you by the number 4. But know your number. You know what? From a certain perspective, it sounds like the most obvious thing in the world that if you're running a business of any kind, in or outside of IT, there are certain metrics that you need to be monitoring on a regular basis. But we quote, or I should say, Colleen Fry, our colleague Colleen Fry wrote this story, which is really, really good, by the way, folks. And we're only going to scratch the surface of what she talked about in here. We'll link to this from the show notes too. Colleen was otherwise occupied today. I would have loved to have had her on the show to talk about this herself, but she couldn't fit us in. So we'll talk about it on our own. But I do encourage folks to read the story. She quotes Rex Frank, a longtime managed services consultant who now works for Pax8, saying you would be surprised and disappointed how many MSPs and other IT providers out there aren't really closely monitoring the business performance metrics of various kinds at their companies. So we know people need to be encouraged to do this more rigorously. I think the question that comes up a lot is, well, what are the numbers that matter? And so that's what this article Colleen wrote it is about. What are some good examples of numbers that you might want to consider focusing your attention on? And she split it up into a number of different categories. So financial key performance indicators, for example, and our good friend Rayan Buchianico, who has been on this show with us before, pointed to gross profit margin as probably the number one financial metric that you want to have a really strong handle on. And she says if that number drops below 40%, you're going to have trouble being profitable, and that's a big bright red flag. Sales and marketing metrics. Rex Frank, in fact, recommended that you keep a close eye on what he calls marketing qualified leads and sales qualified leads. So marketing qualified leads at the beginning of the funnel, the beginning of the process. Once those leads have been winnowed down and qualified, you get to the sales qualified leads. And why those numbers are so important to him is because he says if you start from a monthly recurring revenue target, if you know how much incremental revenue you want to bring into the business every month, you can work backwards from there. As long as you know your close rate and your qualification rate, you can work backwards from that revenue target to a sales qualified lead and marketing qualified lead target, and then measure how you're doing. Did I hit my numbers this month or not? Which just sounds like a really good, logical, rigorous kind of way to run the sales and marketing operation. And then there are some operational metrics outlined in the story as well. The one that Rayan highlighted here as especially good to keep an eye on is time to ticket resolution. How quickly do tickets get resolved, which obviously is important for the organization. But it also helps you sort of see who are your most and least productive technicians. If you're collecting that on an individualized basis, you can start making comparisons, see who might need some coaching or training, see who might be, better suited for this kind of a job versus that kind of a job. Can also kind of help you understand if you are, how utilized your technical staff is. Are you properly staffed? Do you have enough people, too many, too few, et cetera? Last quick point, I think, before we move on a little bit is a lot of this hinges on you having good input, good data to base these metrics on. And that means being very rigorous about keeping the information in your PSA system in particular complete and up to date at all times, because garbage in, garbage out. If there's bad data in the PSA, none of these metrics are going to do you very much good. So you have to get very disciplined about that. But if you can do that, then these are some numbers, some dials on the dashboard essentially for you to watch on a regular basis and see how you're doing.
So, Rich, your technician utilization rate, there's always that one technician that you have on staff that's like really good at making coffee. Do you include that as part of their utilization rate? Like, is that, or does that work against them if they go make coffee?
I think that's a different metric.
Is that Eric, what metric is that? Is that the coffee utilization rate?
I don't care if they're making coffee. I just care if the tickets are getting closed. We're in completely virtual. Plus, we do some outsourced help desk. So we're working with another company and getting KPI back from them, and they're in charge of making sure that people are doing what we're paying them for. So that just takes that off our plate. But
then you don't have to worry about them making coffee because that's their own place, not your problem.
They could be smoking hash. Whatever the customer's happy in the end. And the ticket's resolved. Ideally, in a perfect world, our tickets are internal and they're automatically being generated because there was a problem that we detected ahead of time and dealt with before the end user experienced something. That's obviously not completely possible, but the less reactive tickets we have, the better off that we are. But yeah, I just make coffee, whatever.
So on a more serious note, though, there's a lot in this article to dive into. It's 4 pages. It's very dense. There's lots and lots of good stuff in here. And Eric, I want to get your thoughts on a couple of them. But there was one section that stood out to me because I've been here at ChannelPro for a long time, and we talked to many MSPs, and this points out one area that a lot of MSPs really struggle, and that's with pricing. And there's a section here on getting prices right. Eric, how difficult is that to do? Because it seems like every MSP struggles with that.
Yeah, you struggle with it. I think it's more important not to get your prices right, to get your costs right. And, then you work forward with the appropriate margin that you need to make to be successful. I am the worst person on the back end of the business you'll ever run into. So Rayanne is a neighbor. She lives literally a couple miles down the street, and listen to her. Don't listen to me. But that's a great article. I read that, and there's like some really good key points in there. Pricing, there's a lot of great books out in pricing. If you're not really sure what you want to do, it's bundling. Just don't use the B word. But package and pricing and profit. And there's a plug for Nigel. That's a great book. Karl's got a couple good books on he's got a couple good books. He's got like 20 books. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry, Karl.
But you're not lying. He's got like 20 books.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got some good information on it. So there's plenty of stuff out there where people have already done the legwork. It's not that difficult, but you got to get the back end. Okay, well, what's going to be in my security stack? What's in my core fundamental offering? What's in our professional services lineup? We've had great success building out offerings around the M365 transition into business premium and adding policies. And we've just been bundling it, put a flat rate on it. We're using the same templates over and over again. We're getting our customers, existing customers or customers we might have just done a 365 migration for, well, they're paying us some additional money. They're paying us for some additional services, and we'll insert a third-party vendor or two in there if they're not going to go with us all in managed services, because not everybody does that. It's what we prefer, but we do have a lot of clients because we're spread out so much that, we're touching part of their network or part of their IT. But definitely getting a handle on your costs and then making sure that you've got margin in it. And tracking.
Well, sure. And I've heard a lot of advice too from MSPs. It's like you might get the pricing right today, but pricing is something you have to go back to all the time, and be careful of things like stack creep as you add new tools and add this little bit incremental amount, and then you never go back and adjust your pricing. So I think staying on top of it is one of the other big things to do.
Yeah, many of us, we vet our vendors okay, but we'll have so much overlap in the stack, and so that's right on your bottom line. It's taking money out of your business that you can't use elsewhere in it. So definitely identifying those vendors and making sure you got what's actually needed and what's valued. There's a lot of times you'll adopt something, you'll price it, everything will be great. We don't like to line item items, so that these things would go in part of a bundle. I would not just price a line item, but then you run into user adoption issues, things like training, security awareness training, just application training, Microsoft training, things like that. You'll go pay for that, and all of a sudden it's coming out, and you start looking at usage stats, and there's like 2 people used it. So we've whittled our stack way down because of that.
Yeah. Anything else in this particular article? There's a lot in here, so I'm certainly going to recommend that people go to the show sheet for episode 193. If you're watching on YouTube, open up the description area or go to channelpronetwork.com, find the show sheet there, and definitely dig into this. There's a lot of good stuff. Any one in particular thing that you read in here, Eric, that stood out that you're like, yep, that's something that you need to definitely keep an eye on or do?
Well, the Rayanne's portion in there is really good. I've heard her say it over and over and over again and flog me because I'm very sloppy on that perspective. Alan Edwards had a good point in there. We've worked with him in the past. He's got a good understanding of the industry. So I just go read it. I mean, everybody in our articles, is a thought leader in the industry. You're not going to go wrong listening to him.
Excellent advice from Mr. Eric Long. Rich, anything else on this before we segue over into our interview?
Just a very quick thing. There was an interesting sidebar in the story Colleen wrote about the question of how open should you be about these metrics with your employees? Is this something that just the owner or the senior management team looks at, or should everybody be able to see how where these numbers are at? And interestingly enough, the consensus among the experts seemed to be that the more mature companies share more data than not. It doesn't necessarily mean you show everything to everybody all the time, but companies that are open about these numbers that you're tracking create a sense of investment and belonging and trust and mattering among the employees. And so that, generally speaking, that's a good thing as opposed to keeping these numbers close to the vest.
Good, solid advice. Something to definitely think about. So go check that article out, folks. But now we are going to take a short break. And when we come back, Rich and I are going to be on the other side with a great interview with Arlin Sorensen. We're going to be talking about peer groups and a whole lot of stuff in there. It's a great interview. You are not going to want to miss it. And then we'll be back with Eric Long on the other side. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Ready to grow your business in ways you haven't even imagined yet? Tune in to B2B Tech Talk, Ingram Micro's global podcast, to hear what's next in the IT space. Industry leaders, subject matter experts, and more share their valuable insights to provide listeners with the best growth opportunities, with some interesting stories sprinkled in along the way. Listen, subscribe, and follow B2B Tech Talk wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, because it's time to imagine more.
And welcome back to part 2 of this episode of ChannelPro Weekly. If you ask any successful channel pros to list out some of the things that have been critical in helping them along their journey, one item many will have in common is being part of a peer group. But what are they? And how can one contribute to your success? Well, there's no one better to answer those questions and more than Arlin Sorensen, who around the start of the century founded the HTG peer groups, which would become a successful network of IT pros around the globe. Now that continues today under ConnectWise, where he's currently the VP of Brand and Ecosystem Evangelism over there. Welcome, Arlin.
Great to be with you today.
It's great to have you on. Long time coming, I would say. We've been wanting to get you on here for a while. Please, for those who I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with you and what you do, but for those who may not be familiar with you, please tell us a little bit about you and what you do over there at ConnectWise.
Yeah, so I came into ConnectWise back in 2018 when they acquired HTG peer groups from us, and have migrated my way onto the strategy and growth teams where I help with looking forward, trying to figure out how we can stay relevant in the industry and to help our partners succeed. So it's been a fun transition. First time I had a boss in over 40 years, so that was a little bit of a change, but we're getting adapted and great folks to work with.
Well, that's awesome. And that's really a lot of your story, because I know that ConnectWise acquisition was pretty recent. And then before that, you had a long story of being an entrepreneur and founding various businesses, and kind of went through the M&A process many, many times to kind of get to where you are. But the work you did with HTG peer groups is kind of one of the reasons why we're here. Tell us a little bit about how that kind of got going and where that started.
Sure. Well, like many great things, there was no plan. It just happened. Back in 2000, I was running a IT company at the time, HTS, and we had geared up for Y2K. And I had hired about 10 people because we were going to have the greatest opportunity in the history of IT. And in April of 2000, at our management team meeting, we were hemorrhaging badly. We had way too many people with no work. And that's when one of the folks on the team said, we just need to talk to some other partners and see if they found the gold in the pot at the end of the rainbow, because we weren't seeing it. So we called 3 other Iowa companies and said, would you meet us in Des Moines and spend a half a day and just compare notes? And luckily they all said yes, and we did. And we spent the entire day and didn't talk a lot about Y2K because there was no activity anywhere, but we did talk a lot about business and how to help each other grow. And that was the start of HTG.
Yeah, we were all expecting planes to be falling from the sky and, nuclear power plants to be erupting. It was going to be chaos, and then there wasn't. So how much did you gear up for that? Like how much extra staff did you have?
So we went from 25 to 36 actually in 99, and we went back to 25 by the summer of 2000. And the whole reason that we were able to reduce was because we talked to others, and there was not going to be any work. So we either had to reduce staff or do something very different because we were bleeding cash bad.
I can imagine. So tell us the story a little bit about kind of how that really got going. So you kind of called a meeting with some local partners like you at the time, and you sat around a kitchen table, from how I understand the story goes. Tell us a little bit about how that started and then how it kind of grew from there.
Yeah, we actually met in a meeting office space we rented in Des Moines for the day, and sat around the table and just compared notes. And as we did, it became obvious that if we just communicated, we could learn a lot from each other. And at the end of that day, we followed up and reached out and said, hey, we had a good time. We learned a lot. Would you be willing to do this again? And they all said yes. And so for the first year or so, it was just the 4 companies. But then gradually people began to hear about it, and we gradually added another one and another one. And I never had any intention of creating more than one group. And the purpose of the group was to just help. 12 was my magic number I was shooting for. And we got to 12 companies in 2005 and had a really solid group that met every quarter and were really focused on helping each other. And I went to, channel events, and people were coming up and saying, we want your peer group. And it was like, oh, no, we got 12. That's it. So I started to take a waiting list, and pretty soon I had 30 companies on a waiting list. And so in 2006, we said, let's try another one. Maybe there's 12 more crazy companies that would do this. And in the summer of 2006, we added a group. And then in the fall of 2006, we added another group. And then in 2007, we went to SMB Nation, and I did a presentation around the power of peer groups. And we added 60 companies in 2007 coming out of that, and it just exploded from there. So, there was no strategy, there was no plan. And my leadership team would say that we got in way over our heads real fast. But everybody stepped up, and we held it together until we could put an infrastructure underneath all this desired outcome.
You've been doing peer groups, informally, then more formally for over 20 years at this point, Arlin. But I mean, how widely understood and accepted is the peer group concept in the channel at large right now?
I would say a lot of the channel knows about peer groups. I wouldn't say it's widely understood what peer groups really are all about. And certainly I don't think it's understood the different flavors of peer groups, because there are lots of ways to do peer groups. And I'm the first to admit that what we do is different than what others do. And there's no right or wrong answer. It just depends on what you're looking for, really. But, there's still a lot of people that have not ever heard of HTG or Evolve, surprisingly. Of course, there's a lot of younger people than me around today that probably weren't even born when I started peer groups. But so, there's still work to be done there. But, what we're finding right now is that companies that are in peer groups are asking us to go much more broadly. So, we're doing service peer groups now. We've got a CFO peer group. We're doing an M&A peer group. So we're doing a lot of these more role-based or functionally based groups to support the general business kind of peer groups that we've run for over 20 years.
If you were to summarize or outline for somebody who is, either new to the concept or a little bit skeptical about it, I mean, how would you describe the ROI of being part of a peer group?
My experience is that if you actually embrace the peer group experience, you really can't measure the ROI. I mean, one of the beautiful parts of kind of where we're at in our industry today is that we're seeing a number of companies that are coming to the point of transition where they're beginning to exit. And, the number of folks that exit their organization and come back and say, we would have never got here if it hadn't been for our peer group experience is really heartwarming. And they can't put a number on it. It's like, it's exponential. So I don't think about it in terms of ROI from a dollars and cents thing. I think more about what's the outcome or the impact going to be. And, and what we do with Evolve, it's not just financial. Obviously, that part matters, and we want to make sure companies achieve their success financially. But we're really focused on legacy and life and making sure that people, not only have a successful business, but have got success at home. We want them to be successful in their leadership because that's such an important part of being successful all the way around. And so we've kind of got these 4 different areas that we really target and focus on and keep people, moving forward in. And we find that it's an ROI across all those things that really brings the value out of what we do with Evolve and what we're trying to accomplish for folks.
Part of why we're talking about peer groups with you this week is that I believe the latest quarterly round of peer group meetings will be taking place later this week as we record this. So, I mean, what does the typical agenda for one of the groups meeting this week look like? Just to give people a sense for what kinds of things you do and discuss and learn about. What does the agenda for this week's meetings look like?
Yeah, so I would say most of our groups spend some time, doing a quarterly report. So they give a quarterly board report that focuses on how their financial performance was. We use a series of scorecards that measure, how you're doing as an individual from an emotional life perspective. How are things going at home? So we have a spouse family scorecard that we ask spouses or family members to fill out so we can have a measure on how people are doing in their personal relationships at home. We have a manager scorecard, which we ask our members to have those that report to them fill out every quarter to give them feedback on how they're doing as a manager. So we've got these tools to help us put together what we call our monthly dashboard report. And those get shared primarily on day 1. So kind of spend the first day catching up on how people are doing and what's happened in the last quarter. On day 2, we focus on the plan of the quarter, which in Q3 is going to be life planning. So each group will spend some time talking about what have you accomplished in the last year in regards to what you're trying to do with your life and what's the next year look like. Because another thing that happens on day 2 is goal setting. So we'll ask each member to set 2 business goals and a personal goal that they'll be accountable to come back next quarter and defend. And that's really one of the key parts of making a peer group, I think, providing ROI is setting relevant goals. So they got to be smart. They've got to be, things we can measure. They've got to align to plans, which is why planning is so important for us. One of the things that will happen in a peer group is people come to hear a lot of really great ideas and they want to go chase those shiny objects, which is not the way to run a successful company because there's too many shiny objects. So planning really helps us keep focused. So as people are setting goals, if it doesn't align to their plans, that's when the group says, no, this goal is not a good goal. You need to really think about what it is you want to accomplish this year and make sure your goals align. And so goals are an important part of what happens on day 2. We have subject matter experts come in the room. So in my rooms, for example, I've got Paul Dipple coming in to talk about financials and OML and some of those kind of things to give us some direction. I've got one of the folks from the growth team at ConnectWise coming in to talk to one of my groups about the reason that group exists and what we're trying to accomplish. So people will bring in a variety of different external speakers to help deliver messaging that's appropriate for where the group is kind of in their journey. And what happens in groups, Rich, is we've got some that are fairly, newer groups. We've got some of the groups that have been around. I've got groups that have been together for over 10 years. So we just, really tailor the agendas to fit the makeup of the rooms that we're working with.
That's interesting, Arlin. Rich, let me jump in for a second. It's really interesting when you were talking, and I was thinking, like, it sounds a lot like like an employee review, and it seems like a business owner might need that structure, because you said you haven't worked for anybody in 40 years, but I can see how that could be a big problem for a lot of business owners because they don't have anybody to kind of check their progress and keep them accountable. And this kind of group model might provide the structure that a business owner needs to stay focused and targeted.
Yeah, I mean, if I was going to pick one thing that I think really makes peer groups valuable, it's accountability. Most business owners run a business because they want to be their own boss, which means they don't want to have to report to anybody. And while that's a wonderful way, and I love being an entrepreneur and being my own boss, at the end of the day, sometimes I'm my own worst enemy. I make decisions and choices that are not the right thing based on the good of the company. And having somebody that can, say, hey, whoa, what are you trying to do here is a really valuable part of what peer groups can provide.
I can also imagine that those spouse reports lead to some very interesting and juicy conversations.
They really do. What I always tell people is the score is really not the most important part. It's the conversation that happens as you get to the score. We've got 15 questions on that spouse family scorecard. And I guarantee you, if you actually sit down and have that conversation, you're going to learn something every time you do it. Because a lot of us as founders and entrepreneurs, we kind of try to run our families the same way we try to run our business, which isn't necessarily the right way to do it. So asking the conversational questions is really an important part of what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and you were talking about ROI a little bit, and we're talking about things like a spouse report, and that some of these groups have gone on for 10 years. I have to imagine that some of the people in these groups get awfully close, especially if you're diving into the personal level.
Absolutely, they're very closely, tightly knit, and it's a support group basically, for entrepreneurs, and we all need them at some point in our journey. I mean, I don't know an entrepreneur that hasn't gone through the ups and downs of trying to run and lead a company. And it can be really lonely at the top. And you don't feel like you can go to your teams necessarily for that support internally. So having a trusted group all on the same journey, all realizing the same challenges is extremely valuable.
Arlin, are there certain kinds of people who are really well suited to a peer group, and others who maybe just don't get the value that they could get from the experience because they're not a fit for that kind of experience?
Yeah, there's no question, Rich, that if you're unwilling to be transparent, certainly a peer group is not for you. And some folks hold things extremely tight to the vest, and they're not going to share openly. You just don't get a lot of value out of a peer group if that's the case. There are some that think they know all the answers and they don't really need anybody else's input. They're not very good peer group members because they're always giving advice but not necessarily taking advice. One of the dynamics that happens in every group room is that groups get extremely tired of telling people to do the same thing quarter after quarter after quarter. They see the problem, they know the solution, but the individual is unwilling for some reason to take action. And so they don't make very good members. If you're not willing to change, peer group's not really a place for you because it will drive change. And certainly in the Evolve program, it's not only in your business, it's going to drive change in your life as well. And from my perspective, that's probably the most valuable part of what happens in a peer group is changes that happen in people's lives and legacies, because it has broad impact for the future.
We should probably circle back to something that you touched on a little bit earlier. I mean, when you first created peer groups, it was one format for one kind of person. It was just one thing. And at ConnectWise now, IT Nation Evolve, it's grown much more varied. There are multiple ways to participate for different kinds of people. So just paint a little picture about the different kinds of alternatives out there for someone who might be interested in a peer group.
Yeah, we actually have quite a variety of options today. We have our traditional 2-day face-to-face business owner groups, which we call Evolve Level 3. We have a completely online version, which we call Evolve 1, which is monthly 60 to 90-minute calls. We do a lot of the same kinds of things, but it is, all online. And then we have a kind of a hybrid we call Evolve 2, which is sort of a one-to-many kind of approach where we have a larger group of people that we do content delivery to, and then we break into smaller groups for interaction and things like that. So there's 3 kind of flavors for business owners. And then in addition to that, we have our service exec groups, which are designed for service managers, VPs of service delivery, those kind of things. We have a CFO group today that is focused on people that are really responsible for finance. I lead an M&A group for companies that are either thinking about doing acquisitions or transitioning out themselves. So we're trying to build role-based support groups because we realize the value of peer groups isn't just at the owner level. It flows through the entire organization.
You said that that's kind of how you do peer groups. So contrast that a little bit with maybe how like others do peer groups, and what are some of the pros and cons that your style of group provides?
Yeah, I mean, I think of like service leadership. They have some peer groups, and they're very, very deep in the financials. Digging through the numbers and talking about OML and using their Sleek tool, those kind of things. So it's I call ours kind of a breadth play in terms of peer groups. Service leadership is very much a depth play in terms of financials. True Methods groups, a lot of that is focused around sales and operational kinds of measures and focus. Got Robbins groups that are very focused around marketing kinds of things. So there's lots of different kind of variations, I would say, on peer groups that are out there. And the good news is you can find a peer group to help you with most anything you want to do in your business. But you've also got to have a plan for how you're going to actually use it. And one of the things we really try to encourage our members to do is not get too aggressive with what they go home and try to change all at once. I was in a peer group before HTG, True Profits groups, and I was notorious for coming home with a long list of things that I had heard others talk about that I just dumped on my management team and told them to go do those things. That was a bad mistake because number one, we couldn't execute them all. Number two, they didn't all make sense. And number three, I just kind of dumped and ran and let them try to figure it all out, which was a bad way to do it. So, I tell people, if you get one thing a quarter, if you make one change a quarter, you will change the trajectory of your business and your life in short order. But you can't do it all. So you got to really be specific and pick the right things, which is why plans are so important. They help provide some guardrails around what you should and shouldn't be doing.
As far as the structure of the group, you mentioned earlier that you got to 12, and 12 was like the magic number, and number 13 couldn't take on number 13. Now, I have to ask, it was the limit 12 because that's some kind of magic number for group success, or is that just because that was how many chairs were at the table that you met at?
It was the number I could effectively manage at that time, right? And today it's less than that. Today it's, 10's kind of our magic number today, because we go a little bit deeper than we did originally. So, it's all about making sure every member gets their amount of kind of focus and time. And, when you're dealing with a 2-day event, if you get too many in the room, there's people that are going to not have the focus that they need. And so, today I like 10. It gives me a little flexibility so I can go a little bit deeper in a situation where there's something that pops up that looks like it needs some attention, and sometimes that comes up on a spouse scorecard, for example. I can tell you when it dips too low, we need to intervene. We need to have some real serious conversation about spending some time focused on things that matter. And we'll see numbers on the financials that go in the tank. And at that point, we need to slow down and we need to have a conversation about what happened and make sure they understand that this is not okay. It'll be a problem if they don't correct it before the next time we get together.
Arlin, if there's ever been a time when channel pros have needed peer support, it's the last 18 months, right? And yet in a lot of ways, I imagine it was difficult, if not impossible, for you to do things the way you normally would. So, I mean, what has the pandemic and this kind of post-pandemic transition period we're in now, what's that been like for the peer groups?
Well, certainly everything we ever knew went out the window back in March of 2020. We had our February meetings in Phoenix. Things were great. Looked like we were off to another great year. And the pandemic hit, and we immediately moved to scramble mode to figure out how to adapt to a virtual world. The good news was that the majority of IT has fared fairly well financially, which has been a real blessing. And the peer groups have actually hung together much better than we expected. We thought there'd be some drop off in terms of people feeling like they got the value, because a lot of the value of peer groups doesn't even happen in the peer group room. It's the dinners that we have together in the evenings. It's what you do at over breakfast. It's at the bar late at night. It's those interpersonal connections that people make. And, particularly in the structure we have with Evolve now, where our groups all meet in the same venue the same week. So it's not just the people in your room you can connect with. You've got all of Evolve there. So there's lots of opportunity to get value, and that just all evaporated when we got to the pandemic. So we learned a lot about how to do virtual meetings effectively. And, I credit the team for digging in, doing the research, providing us with guidance and that kind of stuff to help us kind of bridge that gap. The harder part of the pandemic is coming out of it now and having to do hybrid meetings. It was difficult doing online only meetings, but the concept of half the group in the room and half the group online is really a challenge, and a lot of it's technical issues that you run into with people can't hear, they can't see, and all that stuff. But I got to give a lot of credit to our 40 plus facilitators who really took the challenge and did the hard work to figure out what would work and wouldn't work with their particular groups, and put the discipline in place that we're going to take breaks and we're going to make sure that everybody gets away from their computer so you can come back and stay engaged. And I was very impressed with how we got through it and the way our groups interacted. So, we did hybrid meetings last quarter, which were a challenge. There's no question about that. But this quarter, we're really hoping most of our folks will be back together face to face in Denver. And I'm ready to shake hands and do those kind of things together again.
Is there anything that you've learned from this pandemic experience that will be a permanent change or influence on how you run peer groups?
Yeah, I think for sure we learned that we can provide a lot of value virtually. So I'd be misstating if I said that we always kind of viewed the virtual experience that we've had as kind of less valuable maybe than the face-to-face opportunities. And I think that we've learned that we can deliver the same kind of value virtually if we put the effort into it and we really leverage technology in the right way. So I think it will help us expand our reach and our footprint. I mean, one of the big barriers to peer groups has always been the need to travel every quarter and give up, really for a 2-day meeting, you're giving up 4 days basically. And we have a community day with Evolve every quarter. So it's really a week every quarter that you're committing to travel and peer groups. And so for smaller companies, that's a huge investment. And so I think you'll see that we'll try to do more things virtually to enable folks that can't participate face to face economically or for other reasons. And especially with some of the role-based things, where they've got a full-time day job and the owner may not necessarily want them being gone a week every quarter to go to a peer group meeting. Our service exec groups have been kind of a blend. So we do a couple face-to-face and 4 online sessions. And I think you're going to see more of those kind of things come out in the future where we'll try to offer different versions of the program virtually and face-to-face.
Well, that's awesome. So for those who are listening who may not have considered peer groups before or didn't know about them and are just now hearing it and saying like, oh my gosh, this is what I need. This is exactly what I want. How would you recommend that people kind of get started into researching peer groups, and what should they look for? How should they get started if this is a path they want to go down?
Yeah, I mean, I would ask around. I'd talk to peers. That's really the best way to really understand the power of a peer group. And once you become interested in getting involved with peers, then it's a matter of picking the flavor or the area that you want focus on in terms of, what you want to accomplish or what your business needs right now. We have people come in and leave Evolve and move to other programs based on where their business is and the growth that they're having. We have folks that are in Evolve and in other groups. We have a lot of folks that are in Evolve and Robin's groups or Gary's groups, because it provides different things for different parts of their organization. So, but start with a peer. That's the place to find out the value. And, once you kind of get that, then it's a matter of figuring out which one really fits you the best for what you need today.
And do the groups have like their own softball teams? So they like play other groups?
We haven't done that, but that's a great idea.
So a little friendly competition between all the peer groups. Awesome.
One of the things that I know for sure is there's plenty of opportunity out there for us to add partners. The penetration of peer groups in the channel is very low, actually. So there's a lot more people that could benefit if we can just get them to be willing to let down the guard and trust. Because it's a big step, when you walk into a room and you got to let yourself be transparent. A lot of folks are uncomfortable with that. But, in all the years I've been doing this, and today we serve over 660 folks in peer groups, the number of times that we've had anything that would be considered, a breach of trust in a room, it's very low, very, very, very low.
Very, very cool.
Protect that very carefully.
That's great to hear. So unfortunately, we're out of time. But Arlin, I want to thank you so much for coming on and joining us to talk about this. It's an important topic, and I think something that a lot more people should know about, because it's probably something that could help a number of channel pros who especially might be struggling in whatever this new world is that we now live in. Now is probably a better time than ever to get involved. And for Arlin, for those who wanted to reach out to you and learn more about what the ConnectWise's peer groups with IT Nation Evolve and whatever, how can they get a hold of you? Where can they go?
Yeah, the easiest way is email Sorensen, SORENSEN @connectwise.com. And would love to hear from people. I just want to say thanks to ChannelPro and you guys for the support you provide to the channel. I mean, desperately needed. It's been great to partner with you over the years, and I look forward to continuing to make a difference together in the channel as we know it today.
Thank you. And to you as well. Definitely great. Thank you so much. So on that note, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, Eric Long will be joining us again on the other side. We'll break down what's coming up in the weeks ahead, some regular end of the show features, and a little bit of fun as well. You won't want to miss it. Stick around. We'll be right back. And we are back here with part 3 of ChannelPro Weekly. Rich, a great interview with Arlin Sorensen. Of course, Eric Long is here with us on the other side. Eric, I know you haven't got a chance to listen to that, so I know you don't have any comments other than, of course, it was a great interview. So Absolutely. Good job, boys.
Arlin, yeah.
And Arlin. Rich, we dove into a lot of stuff there. Anything in particular you want to highlight or call out?
Yeah, one of the things that I don't believe we spent a lot of time on, unless I'm forgetting in that interview, but that comes up sometimes, because we did talk about how there are plenty of channel pros out there who do not participate in any kind of a peer group. And, there are two primary reasons for that when it happens. And one is I'm just too busy to make the time. But the other is this concern about, do I really want to share all this information with a bunch of people, peers of mine, essentially. And I'll just kind of point out, I personally, and if somebody in the audience has a counterexample, contact us, let us know. It would be interesting to know. But I've never come across somebody who felt like being open in a peer group with peers has hurt their business, cost them business. So if that reservation is what's been keeping you from getting involved, I wouldn't let that dissuade you. There may be other reasons, the time investment, the money investment, et cetera, but you shouldn't be worried about opening up to other people who do what you do, because I'm not familiar with anyone getting burned by that.
There's a matter of trust involved. Some people are just not very trusting. Eric, are you a trusting individual?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've been involved in a number of peer groups over the years. I'm not really in anything right now. We do SMB Alliance with Ingram. And then we do some ASCII stuff, which is not really peer group, obviously, but, we've done others in the past, and great people. We've disclosed financials, everybody signs an NDA. You're typically geographically disparate. So, you don't have to worry about the guy in your backyard. A little different for us because we're playing in a couple different, states. So that makes it a little more difficult. But I got a lot out of them. There's a lot of times it's, it's more input than it was output. So, I think they have their place, definitely, especially on the operations side, operations, accounting, the understanding numbers, things like that, because most of them will concentrate on that, and they're all good at doing that. You just got to listen.
Yeah, as we commented earlier, when you're an MSP, you get into it because you have a very technical background, and then you realize, oh crap, I have no idea how to run a business, and I need to know about HR, and I need to know about accounting, and I need to know about all of this kind of stuff. I think peer groups could be probably a very useful thing for a lot of those job functions that you may not know well, especially if you can't hire out or farm it out.
Yeah, no doubt, absolutely. Gives you a sounding board too. You got a group of your peers, but we've got that already. We've got some great Facebook groups up there that you can really antagonize a lot of people all at once with what's just like 2 sentences. It's amazing what you can do.
Yeah. Well, and if they meet once a month, then you have an excuse to shower and do your hair once a month. And people need that kind of motivation as well. Okay. Let's Eric's shaking his head. He's like, this is just not good. It's not good. Funny stuff. All right. So, we're going to move on. We've got a fun segment coming up. This is, Rich, I guarantee the only time in the show's history we will do this and probably ever be able to do this, but we're going to roll with it because it sounds like a heck of a lot of fun. So Eric is the proud owner, master. What is your relationship to the chickens?
I'm a chicken.
A chicken handler?
Chicken tender.
You're a chicken tender. I thought that was after you cook them and bread them and deep fry them. But Eric's got 6 new chickens, and I bet they're really cute. So they don't have names. So Eric has been so kind as to let us name his chickens. And I couldn't say no. I couldn't pass it up. So we're gonna take a short break, and we're gonna let Eric get outside. And so hopefully if you're listening, this one you might want to go check out the show on YouTube so you can see the awesome chickens and be a part of naming them. And if you don't agree with our names, podcast at channelpronetwork.com. Tell us what names you would have picked, or go into the description area here on YouTube and tell us what names you would have picked. But Rich and I get to name the chickens, so it's gonna be fun. So stick around for that. We'll be back in just a second. Okay, and we are back. I believe we have Eric, who is getting on location here with the chickens. Eric, are you there?
I am here. I'm here with a lot of chickens, but we've got 6 new ones that are part of this. I don't know if we're going to call this an event or not. If you ever wanted to find out how to get chickens to come up to you, you would just take out a bag of mealworms. Very easy to do. So I've got to distract the existing chickens first because they don't like the new birds. So you got to take a little handful there, and then we're going to have to go over and find the new birds. Well, they're busy. I see I fooled them. They don't know I'm going over here.
So Eric, how difficult is it to raise chickens, and what else do you raise?
Really, chickens, bees right now. All right, so trying to get their attention. They're kind of skittish. These are free-ranging chickens, so they wander the entire property. There they are. So there's 6 of them.
Look at them. They're so cute. Folks,
Yeah.
if you're listening to this, you got to go to YouTube and you got to watch the video for this one. They're just adorable. But it's a shame that they are unnamed. So Rich, how do you want to do this? I'm thinking that we do that, we name 2, I'll name 2, you name 2, and then maybe we'll put it out to our listeners to suggest names, and we'll pick 2 names from listeners and viewers to suggest a couple names for the other 2. What do you think?
It's a good plan. I like it.
All right. So Rich, first name to you. Which one are you gonna name, and what are you gonna call it?
The brown one.
Yeah, I'll go with the brown one. How old are they, by the way?
These guys are probably about 3 to 4 months old right now. So, and they're not actually identical. Like this one's got a little head thing there, a little fro on his head. And there's some that have combs, some don't have combs. So they're.
So Rich, are you gonna use like a theme to name them, like name them after something, or are you gonna go family? What's your thought process here on the names?
This is all on you guys. I could care less. Because eventually we're gonna have to kill them. No, just kidding. Eventually something's gonna kill them, so you don't get attached to these things.
Well, you know what? My first name actually is inspired maybe by I was kind of thinking, do we name one of these chickens Colonel Sanders? But I'm going to go with Popeye instead.
We actually already have a Colonel, so.
Okay, well there you go. So now you've got a Popeye too.
That's the Colonel right there. Yeah, well, everybody's got to have a Colonel.
Colonel Chicken over there. So Rich is going after the famous. One's named after the famous fried chicken restaurant chain Popeyes. Which I don't know if that's where that one will end up, but maybe he'll end up in a sandwich someday. So second name to me, I don't know. Okay, like that one right there with the beak. I'll name that one. Let's see. I'll go food related as well, because when I think chicken, I think good, delicious things. So I'm gonna name that one Sandwich. I'm going to name it Sandwich because I like it. I like me a good chicken sandwich. Rich, third name to you.
Well, I'll go in a different direction here. There are lots of things to love about chickens that by reputation, at least, they are not nature's smartest birds. So I'm going to name one of these chickens Einstein.
You'd be surprised they're smarter than you think, especially the more time you spend on Facebook.
Yeah.
Awesome stuff. Well, I guess that leaves the fourth one named to me. I will name. There was one that had a little more yellow in them. So
these are hers.
There was one on the back. It was a little bit more gold, a little more yellow.
They're all
Yeah.
hens. So
They're all hen. Oh, well, I can't name it that then. That wouldn't make any sense. Well, I tell you what, I'll give it a good name. So I'm a big fan of the Legend of Zelda series, and there was a new re-release of Skyward Sword that just came out. So the one that's gold there, I'm going to name it after the princess with her long glowing blonde hair. That is going to be named Zelda. Zelda the chicken. That's my name. So folks, we've got 2 other chickens to name. Why don't you send in your top suggestions, and we will pick out 2 of those, and those will be the other two chickens. So Eric, thank you so much for going on location and sharing the chickens with us. We're gonna give you a chance to get back into the studio. So folks, we'll be right back in just a moment. All right, and we're back. Well, Rich, that was something. a lot of fun. Only here on ChannelPro Weekly, folks. Subscribe today and tell your friends. Eric, I want to thank you so much for being on. But before we say goodbye, Rich, why don't you tell us what we might have missed last week and what might be coming up in the future?
Well, in terms of the stuff you might have missed, a great way to catch up on that every Friday on ChannelProNetwork.com is to check out our In Case You Missed It post written by ChannelPro's own James Gaskin. This week, he's going to be telling you a little bit about the launch of Zoom apps and Zoom events from, you guessed it, Zoom. A big private equity investment in ScalePad, the software asset and hardware asset management folks worth reading up on. A new revenue sharing opportunity for those of you who partner with SAP out there. And how about organic, ethically sourced cocaine at $275 a gram? James has all the details for you. Coming up next week, and in fact, this is coming up today, ConnectWise is hosting its IT Nation Explore event. This is the conference they do more for the technical side of the partners they work with. The kickoff actually was just a few hours ago as we're recording this now, but there's more content coming up over the weeks ahead. Also next week on July 29th is the next SMB Tech Fest event hosted by our buddy Dave Seibert. Check that out, www.smbtechfest.com. That's July 29th online. It's a virtual event for this quarter.
And it's not next week, but we do have a virtual event coming up. Rich, why don't you preview that so people can get it marked on their calendars? This is one they're not going to want to miss.
On August 4th, as a matter of fact, is our Cybersecurity Online Summit, actually the second of those that we're doing in 2021. So a full day of content, 100% dedicated to cybersecurity. Gosh, let's see. I'm hosting a session about security checklists. What are the security steps, processes that you should be doing on a daily, a weekly, a monthly, a quarterly basis? We've got some experts on to talk about that a little bit. We've got some folks on who are going to talk about CMMC. If you're hearing about that a lot, your customers are even maybe starting to ask you about that. We've got a half an hour of content for you to introduce you to what that's all about and what it potentially means to you. The session that there's another session about selling security and overcoming objections, but the one that I'm really looking forward to is going to be hosted by a guy named James Carroll, who is a penetration tester and an ethical hacker. And he's going to be doing some live, this is all virtual, but he's going to be doing some live hacking, folks. If you want to see how the bad guys get into systems like yours and those run by your customers, he's going to have some really interesting demos that he'll be running in real time for us. So lots of interesting stuff on that show. Go to events.channelpronetwork.com to sign up. Virtual event, so unlimited capacity, plenty of time still to sign up.
Awesome. Yeah, make sure you do, folks. It's the cybersecurity summits are some of our most popular events. You won't want to miss it. It's always really good stuff. Yeah, you'll want to check that out. So August 4th, be there or be, I was going to say square, but that's so 50. So be there or be octagon. Okay, folks. Eric Long was our guest, president of TeraCloud. Thank you so much, Eric, for being with us. Hope you had fun.
Of course, always have fun. If you missed anything on that video, which I haven't seen, you just go to TeraCloudFarms.com. We'll have pictures up there. And the results of the chicken naming contest there too.
And if there's any, if anyone wants to reach out to you, get a hold of you for other means other than chicken farming, how can they do that? Where can they go?
Eric at TeraCloud.us.
Awesome stuff. Check him out there, and can't wait to have you back on, Eric. Always a lot of fun. Make sure, folks, when we get Eric back, how will you know? Subscribe to the ChannelPro Weekly Podcast. Subscribe everywhere you can get them. Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple, Stitcher. We're everywhere, folks. Just go there and subscribe. If you like to watch, which we encourage you to, because then you can see cute things like chickens, make sure you subscribe on YouTube, hit the red button and the bell, and you get notifications, and join us each and every week. We always appreciate it. Hit that like button and leave a comment or two. We always want to hear from people. If you do want to send us an email, it's podcast@channelpronetwork.com. Make sure you send us those thoughts, questions, anything that you want to have done on the show. If you want Rich to say something, just put it in the email, and Rich will say it. It doesn't matter what it is. He'll say it out loud. I promise you. And follow us on the socials. Check us out. But that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Thank you so much again, Eric, for being here. Thank you, Mr. Rich Freeman. We will see everybody in episode 194 next week.